Hi, how is everyone? Thank you so much for coming along to the show. First off, I would love to introduce both myself and my wonderful co-star, co-pilot, co-partner. I'm not sure what to refer to you as, the wonderful Mr. Jeff MacDonald. So first and foremost, thank you so much for coming. We've got a huge list of people that are coming in, and one thing that I've been asked to say is that if you are watching through Eventbrite, do actually go up and just above the Eventbrite link, there should be a link to YouTube where you can also watch. And actually, if you're watching in YouTube, then you can pop into the chat as well. So we've got lots of different companies being represented today. We've got Carousel, Bone Daddies, People Matter, lots of people from Reach, some guys from De Winter. I'm just thinking, well, who else we've got on as well? MBWW, Glambia, Mel Metro. You are all so welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. So back with no further ado, as I said, I am Kate Murden, the founder of Push, and this is the wonderful Mr. Jeff MacDonald. And we'll talk a little bit more about us and on our backgrounds in a moment. But really, I really wanted to say that we've had the pleasure of working with Jeff now for probably about the last 3 or 4 years, I think it is, isn't it, Jeff? And over the last 12 months, Jeff and I really kind of decided to formalise the partnership of working together with sessions exactly like this, where because we both have exactly the same objective for our work, and that is that we want to destigmatise mental health and to genuinely create change where organisations truly value the health and well-being of their people as a driver of performance. So that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. And Jeff and I were talking about this, and we were saying, you know, what format shall we do? And obviously we do lots of these kind of talks. And what we tend to do is we tend to do it in a bit of a presentation, obviously in talk format, but with a bit of presentation behind us. And we thought for the purpose of this, we really wanted to make it really conversational. We really wanted to make it super open to all of you guys as well. So with that in mind, we thought we'd literally just have it as a bit of conversation where we talk to each other and find out a little bit more about each other, understanding why this is so important for both of us, and then really kind of sharing why right now making health a strategic priority is more important than ever before, and really kind of digging into some of the context. And then the really important bit, and you know, anyone that has the joy of working with Push and Jeff so far, is that, you know, we want everything that we do to be really practical and really, really tangible. So actually what we'll do towards the end of the show is to go into a little bit of the practical application of how you can all achieve making health a strategic priority in 2021, and even more importantly, what you can do exactly after this call ends. And as we are in conversation with, you know, we really, really would love to hear from you. Please send in your questions into the chat. We will try and either answer them as we're speaking, or we'll answer them towards the end, and we will certainly leave some time to be able to do that. So I suppose without going any further, what's most important is to introduce the wonderful man next to me. Well, kind of not next to me, if only he was, the wonderful Mr. MacDonald. Jeff, I'd love to chat a bit more about you and about your story, first of all, because I think for me, this, you know, and whenever we do this work, this really, really brings to life exactly why this stuff is so important. You know, I think a lot of people are always quite shocked that someone of your caliber and stature and the level that you were within an organization had the experiences that you had, and it really truly brings it to life how it can happen to anyone. So can we start off with a bit of your story? I mean, obviously prior to you doing this, you were working over at Unilever. What happened, and what happened towards you then going on to leave and doing the work that you are doing? And if it's okay with you as you're going through, and I never normally get the chance to do this because normally obviously it is more in a presenting format, I'm going to ask some questions as well about what happened, just so we can really kind of really share that with the audience, if that's okay.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, thank you, Kate, and great to be on the show with you. And I think it's such a good idea to just kind of do it in the form of a conversation. Sometimes you get into presentations and you get all these slides and you got all this content, and I agree with you. It'd be lovely to have others join in and throw some questions. And
I miss those times, don't you? I really miss that. I really miss those times when we actually just used to be in a room with people talking. I mean, God, it seems like a long time ago now.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, I mean, you know, you always introduce me as being so wonderful, but I'm just an ordinary guy who lives down in a little village in the southeast of England.
Oh, you're very
And you know, I think it was Mark Twain, Kate, who once said, "The two most important days in your life, what are they?" You know, and most people say, "Oh, it's the day I was born and the day I die." And then I kind of think, jeepers, what is it about the human species that we are so pessimistic? We can't wait for the second most important day in our life, which is the day that we die. But what he said is that, you know, it's the day we were born and the day we find out why. And, you know, in many ways, you've discovered your why. I mean, you had a career in marketing, and then suddenly there was something that occurred, and you began to really reflect and think about that sense of why. And you know, my why is a very, very simple one. I mean, it's all about trying to create workplaces. And in fact, just the other day, I thought I need to shift it. I don't think it's just workplaces. It's family groups, it's friendship groups, and yes, of course, workplaces, where everybody in those workplaces feel that they genuinely have the choice to just put their hand up and ask for some help if they're struggling with a common form of mental ill health. I mean, that is my purpose. And I can tell you, Kate, ever since I got absolutely clear on that sense of purpose, it has taken me to people like you, to places all over the world that I could never have imagined. Now, why that strong sense of purpose? To give every single person in every organization, everywhere in the world, the chance to be able to put their hand up and ask for some help if they're struggling with a common form of mental ill health. And the reason I'm so passionate about it, trying to live that sense of purpose, is because when I was diagnosed with anxiety-fueled depression back in 2008, doing a big job in Unilever, looking after our home care division, being the HR guy, doing all of that stuff. You know, when I was diagnosed and had to take 3 months off work, the only thing that kept me alive during my darkest moments was knowing that I was loved by so many people. And the only reason I could feel that sense of love was because I was very open about my illness. I spoke to people. I didn't hide behind a stress-related illness or glandular fever. I was just very open about the fact that I was suffering from anxiety-fueled depression and feeling that sense of love. And also there was a friend I used to meet with every 10 days. And, you know, he had 2 years prior to my illness, he'd been so ill that he'd been admitted to the Priory. And I used to meet with Martin and every 10 days, and I saw he was better. And you know what he gave me? He gave me so much hope. So a combination of feeling loved, this sense of hope. Yes, of course, some of the scientific interventions or medical interventions, and a combination of those kind of things got me better. And then in October of 2012, 4 years after my crucible moment in life, and I went back into Unilever and I carried on doing the home care job. And then I started doing a big job around communication, sustainability, and marketing with Keith Weed in Unilever. And while I was doing that job, 2012, one of my closest friends died by suicide. And you know, Kate, I mean, he was the sort of guy, the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. I mean, there's so much truth in that, isn't there? The brighter the light, the darker the shadow. And he was like that. And you know, he died by suicide. And he couldn't even talk to me about his struggles. I had the badge, I had the T-shirt. He couldn't talk to his wife. He couldn't talk to his children. And instead, he went down a path which led to a really tragic outcome. And you know, the night he died, I lay in bed and I thought, that's just not fair. I mean, how can we be in the 21st century when we're all mental, we're all emotional, we're all physical? Why can't we talk about our mental and emotional struggles like I was able to do? Why can't everybody just feel that they can do that? And I just thought, I have to do something about it. And I suppose that was the real catalyst, you know, the loss of my friend, and just coming to a very simple insight. And being a marketeer, you'll love insights. But the insight that I came to was that stigma had just killed my friend. That was the insight. And I just thought, I have to do something about that. And so I started to do some work in Unilever around addressing stigma. And then after about a year and a half of seeing some of the success of that, I left Unilever and have been traveling this journey ever since.
So talk to me a little bit about that. And obviously I do know your story, and I don't know whether or not other people will know it quite as well. So the work that you're obviously doing, you're obviously, as we discussed, you were working over at Unilever previously. And I know that one night you had your first proper attack of anxiety. Talk to me a bit about that. How were there any signs that this was coming up? Was this was back in pre-2012,
So
was
this
it?
is 2008, yeah. So
Right.
2008 is my crucible moment.
Right.
I'm woken up in the middle of the night with
Yeah, I know.
massive panic attack. Now, when you ask me that question today,
Yeah.
and I reflect on my life before the panic attack and how I was feeling, absolutely there were some signs. But you know what? I was oblivious to that stuff. I mean, I didn't know the mere fact that I was being more irritable, the smallest little things irritating me intensely.
Yeah.
I didn't know that might be the beginning of me moving from being stressed to distressed. I didn't know the fact that I was waking up at night, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock of the morning, and can't go back to sleep because I'm worried and anxious about stuff. And I didn't realize the fact that I couldn't eat breakfast, I couldn't eat lunch, I was losing weight, that I wasn't enjoying the things that I love doing, like going for a mountain bike ride, all these sorts of things. Which, by the way, we feel all of that, I'm sure, one day a week or once every 2 weeks or 3 weeks. But the mere fact that was going on for a period of about 3 or 4 weeks, and every single day was like that.
Yeah.
I mean, only now do I realize that those were some very, very strong warning signs. That I was moving from distress to actually anxious, depressed at a kind of almost a medical level. And but yeah, I mean, that's all in hindsight and in retrospect.
Yeah, no, I get that. And and certainly, thinking back over my time, so not dissimilarly, I was signed off for a not dissimilar period of time with stress as well. And actually, if I look back over that, it was the gradual degradation over a period of time, right? It wasn't just one thing that did it. It slowly built up and built up. And for me, it was a kind of knowing that things weren't quite right, feeling like I was just existing, certainly not looking after myself to the degree that the demands of my job needed. And then on top of that, my crucible moment was my mum sadly getting cancer, which fortunately she has made a recovery from, but I just did not have the resilience there to be able to then deal with it. And I think, I look back on that time, and I don't know if you're the same, but the volume of stuff that we have to deal with, and I say at that time, I suppose I'm thinking pre-COVID, right? And obviously the specific situations that we went through, but just that constant relentlessness of stuff coming in, of having to deal with. And if you don't have that resilience there, or that capacity of adaptability, or however we determine it, it can overwhelm, and that's when you get to those moments like you and I had, and within situations where we both have big jobs, yours certainly even greater than mine, but we both have big jobs, and that's a lot for our brains to deal with, on top of all of the other demands being placed upon us.
And I think that's why, our work, your work, my work, and particularly your work around going into organizations and teaching and giving people some of the skills on how to become, I don't like the word resilient.
I know you don't, which is why I hate adaptability in there as well.
I much prefer the word resourcefulness. But all the tools and the education that you bring to organizations and to individuals on, because some of those things are not going to go away, having all this stuff thrown at you at any one time. But I was never taught how to be more resourceful. I was never taught, to dedicate and 60 minutes of my day to look after my overall well-being. I kind of knew what to do about my physical health, but I was never taught how to maintain my emotional health, my mental health. And so then when all those things hit you, because you haven't built up that sense of resourcefulness, things happen. And Kate, it's interesting. I mean, people often ask, are some people more susceptible to anxiety fueled depression than others? And they are. I'm one of them, all right? So I am somebody who is more susceptible to anxiety fueled depression than maybe the normal person in the street. Now, there are three reasons for that they say. The one is it could be it's just in your genes. It's just who you are. And I can tell you, I think that's me. My wife was not my wife, my mum was a very anxious sort of person. And I think it's just part of my genetic makeup. The second reason that you could be more susceptible is trauma as a child, particularly some kind of abuse as a child. That can then manifest itself in later life through anxiety, depression, etc. And the third reason they say is in adult life, it's just the amount of crap that is thrown at you at any one time. So we can probably all deal with a divorce or once off, or we could maybe deal with moving house once off. But imagine losing a loved one, having to move house, go through a divorce, all of these things happening, and the pressures and strains of work and all the rest. If all of that just comes at you at any one time, that might result in you becoming ill with depression or anxiety.
And so interesting, because that certainly, we can relate that to time pre-COVID anyway. But I think actually this becomes even more interesting when we think about what's going on now, right? I think what we are having to deal with, why are we having this conversation today about making health a strategic priority, is because, the impact of health has never been more under the microscope. It's been never more important to consider it because of the impact of the pandemic on all of us. If you think about all of those different things that are going on, working from home / living in the office, never getting away from our work, the relentless sameness, the stretching hours, the lack of stimulation, and then you combine with that this lack of certainty, which, by the way, that we've never had certainty. We've just had a lot of the same thing happening a lot. So a lack of certainty combined with lack of connection, and we're constantly feeling slightly unsafe. And feeling like that is a huge problem. As I said to you, having done now quite a lot of reading around on it, the point being is that once we start feeling unsafe, we come out of our PFC, out of the prefrontal cortex, and the problem there is that we quite simply cannot think as well, and that takes a toll on our short term, because our brain is obviously trying to protect us, but long term, this has a genuinely toxic impact upon our brain, and has a huge effect both psychologically and can lead to obviously chronic physical illness as well. And I believe that, and I'd be really interested in hearing a bit from the conversations that you're having. Certainly the conversations that I'm having with our clients and potential clients, this is happening so frequently now. The amount of fit notes, I think they're called now, rather than sick notes, that are being given in due to issues around mental health is radically rising, despite the fact that obviously some people are still on furlough. So you've got a percentage of the population still on furlough, but actually the number of the fit notes that are coming in are actually increasing. Is that happening? Is that the kind of stuff that you're seeing? Is that the conversations that you're having?
Absolutely. And I mean, the other interesting conversation that I've been having is around this notion of burnout versus depression and anxiety, and how people are feeling completely burnt out because of, as you say, that sort of relentlessness of each day, and people not being disciplined enough to put some boundaries in place, and being disciplined to give themselves some time to look after their overall health, their well-being. So yes, absolutely. And Kate, you were talking, if you think about it, think about those factors. Uncertainty, financial insecurity, the disruption to the social connections, having to now adjust to working from home, all this virtual stuff, the loss of loved ones, the trauma on the front line. I don't think anybody anywhere in the world is immune to those factors. No. And as a result, we are seeing an increased incidence of depression, anxiety, and burnout. And in many ways, for you and I, there is a bit of a silver lining to all of this with respect to COVID. And the silver lining is the following. because nobody is immune to those factors that I've just described. I think the pandemic has democratized mental ill health. It's democratized the conversation, hasn't it? And it's like, and suddenly, and it's been amazing. I mean, I take my hat off to organizations who've truly kind of said, you know what? Yes, business continuity is important, but so is the health, so is the well-being of our people. And we are going to dedicate some time. And so suddenly this whole well-being agenda has also risen to the top of the priority list. It's on the priority list now. Whereas before it was kind of, oh, well-being, oh, some other fluffy intervention, right? Well, tell me more about it when I'm ready for it.
Well, the old saying, a rising tide floats all boats, right? If there's nothing to particularly worry about, then we'll just keep going as we were. And I think you could say that across all areas of business, right? If you think about the seismic changes that businesses have gone through, arguably they should have been doing those over the last 5-10 years, but actually they've never had the real need or crisis point that's going to push them towards that. And actually health, of course, being one huge part of that, it's been pushed forward 5 or 10 years. But what makes me nervous, Jeff, is that a lockdown, coming out of lockdown, whenever that may be, does not mean that this stuff does not become important. I would hate for people to, it's okay now, everything's all right, we're going back to normal. Actually, do you know what? These challenges have always been there. They're just more underlined and more acutely or acutely focused on than maybe they ever have been previously. And I'm also incredibly nervous about the kind of knock-on effect of all of this stuff. We won't be a million miles away from some kind of PTSD from something like COVID,
Yeah, absolutely.
We really won't.
But Kate, but that also makes it, your comment around, well, let's hope that it continues. I mean, I think that the health agenda in organizations has usually come to light in a very reactive way. So we wait for somebody to fall over, we wait for somebody to get very ill with depression and anxiety, and then we throw all the resources and the love and the care to that individual and hope that they'll recover. I think what the pandemic has done is to say, you know what, maybe we should actually invest in keeping people healthy. Maybe we should be more proactive in this. Because there's no point in waiting for people to fall over, and the pandemic has proved it. When people fall over with COVID, productivity reduces, economies go into recession. And so maybe the mindset now is, hey, you know what? If health is the health of our people is such a strategic asset, then maybe we should be more proactive and looking to ways to enhance our people's health. Because if they're healthier, they'll be safer, they'll be happier, and they'll be more productive. So maybe the pandemic drives that more proactive view on maintaining health, rather than, well, we're good around the health of our people because we've got an amazing EAP service that people can dial into when they're ill.
I mean, seriously, I can't tell you the number of conversations that I've had where that has been shared with me, and I'm just like, wow, if that is your health policy, having an EAP, then as you said, fortuitously, is that the right word? That something like COVID has demonstrated, actually, we need something that's preventative rather than reactive. For me, an EAP is crisis, right? And crisis at a push, and we need to be thinking about that work that is much more preventative. To which end, I'd really like to talk a little bit before we start going into I really want to talk about the really practical and tangible concepts that you and I have kind of pulled together, or you've largely led, and we fed into. And guys, everyone watching, we've got a brilliant handout that we're going to share with you afterwards. But before we get to that, you slightly just touched on that, Jeff, when you were talking about why health or why energy is so important, and actually having leaders who get it, who are engaged in it and wholly advocate it. that's one of the most crucial things in actually getting this work going. But could you explain that a bit better? And you do so, you deliver it so beautifully about, you know, why is energy so important to an organization or and the well-being of their people?
Yeah, maybe just before I do that, Kate, is just for people who are listening, I want to just distinguish between, or I want to just make sure everybody kind of understands when we use the word health, what we're talking about. Because I think you often hear the word well-being, you hear the word health, and I think the word well-being is probably a more holistic description of health. Because I think sometimes when we use the word health, people kind of just go to physical health.
Yeah.
But I think when we use the word well-being, people go beyond just physical health. You think about emotional health, you think about mental health, you think about financial health, you think about social health, you think about spiritual health, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think language is quite important in all of this. So why don't we just, you and I now when we're talking about health, we are talking about health in a very holistic manner. Now, because I think language is so important, I like to use language that a CEO or a CFO or a chief marketing officer is kind of going to sort of get. And, you know, in my 25 years of working in Unilever, one of the things we would often talk about, and you'd hear senior people say, is that we want passion, we want drive, we want energy in our organization, and we would talk about the energy of our people, and we, particularly in the sales environments, you talk about those sales teams that are the most passionate about delivering against their targets and having the energy, and what gives you energy. And so the concept of energy is really, really understood at very senior. And there's not one member of a board or an executive team that would say, I don't want to have energized, passionate people working in our organization. And so then where I go to, well, do you know where we get our energy from? We can't have any energy if we aren't healthy. If we aren't healthy physically, emotionally, mentally, and having that sense of purpose and meaning in our lives. And that's our well-being. So if we aren't maintaining our well-being, we aren't going to be energized. And so if we get our energy from our well-being, and by the way, our energy is probably the most important driver of individual, team, and maybe it's a stretch at an organizational level to be able to measure the energy in an organization, but we can measure the energy at an individual level, at a team level. And if they are such important drivers of performance, and we get our energy from our health, from our well-being, then my question is, well, then why is health not a strategic priority?
I know.
Because I bet you every one of your strategic priorities in this business, show me them all, 1, 2, 3, 4 strategic priorities. They're all about enabling the performance of the business. Why is health not there? Because I can tell you, when people aren't healthy, when they are not energized, they don't perform. And you know what? I think senior leaders kind of get that. But I think you've got to bring that argument to them, because you and I live in this space, we work in this space all the time, and we see it's obvious, this link between energy.
Hold on. I think Jeff has frozen. Oh, Jeff, are you back? Jeff, you're back. Hello. Hello. There you are. You're back. Jeff. Okay, he's back. There he is. There he is. There he is.
Did
Hi,
I
Jeff.
lose you? Did I lose you with an internet
You're
connection?
back. That's most important.
Yeah.
There you go. Right. Yeah. So you were saying about the importance of energy and in terms of keeping people going, and therefore why is health not made a strategic priority if we know that? If we know the importance of energy as part of our performance. I mean, and it is palpable, isn't it? You know, as you said, on an individual level, you can absolutely see that. And on a team level, and yeah, I mean, obviously it becomes somewhat more challenging to measure, I guess, on an organization's level, but arguably, you know, every organization is large made up of smalls, right? And if you can look after the smalls, then you can obviously get to the large.
And, you know, we can now, there are some tools out there where we can now measure the well-being of people in an organization. You know, we can get that data, we can measure that. But I think we've got to link it back to the energy of people. You know, I've got a daughter right now. She's 22. She's full of flu and a cold. I mean, she's got no energy. She's got no energy. So she can't perform. She can't perform.
That's the thing, isn't it?
And people, and I remember HR or in organizations, we always used to talk about people being our most important asset. I don't think we should say people are our most important asset. The energy, the health of our people is the most important asset. Eh?
True, absolutely true. So Jeff, tell me something. So I'd love to know, and guys, if you are listening, what I'm going to do, we're going to go into some of the really kind of practical applications of how we make this work. And as I said, we've got a brilliant handout that for anyone that's watching, we will share with you afterwards. Really, really practical, really great ideas of how you can now kind of start turning this into a reality. You know, as I hope we've highlighted, because right now it is more important than ever. And what I'll do now is if we kind of go through them one by one, Jeff, let's just chat them through, and people, you know, please do start sharing any questions that you might have, and we'd love to be able to answer them for you. Jeff, I think what's really interesting about this, and I'd like us to have a quick discussion on this before we actually start going into the application of them. You know, when one of the questions I get asked so often when we start working with a new client is something around whose responsibility is it? Is, you know, in order to develop the health or develop the energy of the organization, is it the responsibility of the employer to look after the employee? Or is it the responsibility of the employee to look after themselves? And I think this is a really interesting discussion personally, because, and I know that you feel exactly the same way, my personal opinion has been that it's always the responsibility of both. Or moreover, you cannot have one without the other. If one is going all out, but the other isn't interested, then everything obviously, of course, falls down. What are your thoughts on that? You know, I'm pretty sure you're in agreement on me, right?
Yeah, I'm absolutely in agreement. However, I think there is a chronology to that. I think there is a chronology. And I think the chronology is the following, that organizations have got to take more responsibility to invest in resources to enhance the health of their people. You can't then ask individuals to show some accountability if the organization is just flogging you to death every single day and is not putting the resources in place. That once those resources are in place, the organization has invested resources to enhance your physical, mental, emotional, created a sense of purpose. Once those resources are in place, then individuals have got to take accountability to maintain their health and use those resources. You know, it's a bit like safety. You know, if you think about safety, organization, if you were to walk into a factory, all right, the organization would have invested in there being earbuds, right? Now, you can't walk into the factory without using the earbuds. There is an individual accountability for you to put the earbuds in. And so I think there's a chronology to that. And I think organizations have got to look themselves very, very honestly in the eye. I mean, there's a wonderful book, Kate. It's called Dying for the Paycheck. Dying for the Paycheck. And it's written by a professor from Stanford University.
Yeah.
You know, Jeffrey Pfeffer. And he has shown he's done all the longitudinal research on the impact that workplaces are having on people's health today. And so yes, absolutely, it's both. But I think organizations, there's a chronology to that. Invest in the resources and then start holding people accountable.
Yeah, because I suppose that's the point, isn't it? All of a sudden, then, as an individual within the organization, you actually start realizing that my employer cares for me, right? My employer cares for me. I'm not just a number, and actually then puts me first and foremost in order to get me performing at my best. It's completely self fueling in that capacity. Yeah, I get it, and I really agree. Let's talk about this then. So let's talk about each part's responsibility. Let's talk about the employer first of all. And I think that, as we've talked about, leadership engagement and advocacy is simply crucial for affecting any of this kind of change, right? You can talk all the talk, but if the behaviors of leadership are entirely incongruent with that, then nothing's going to change, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, very specifically, the CEO. I mean, I want to look the CEO in the eye, and I want to ask the CEO if you agree with me that the energy and therefore the health of your people is the most important driver of their performance. Please tell me why health is not a strategic priority in your business.
Yeah.
And I think in order to get that leadership engagement and advocacy, in some instances, you've got to create the business case for that CEO, for the CFO. But I think also sometimes just bringing an external catalyst into the boardroom, into the executive room, to be able to say some stuff that maybe the CFO doesn't want to say, or the chief HR officer, or the CMO doesn't want to say, or just bringing the outside in and letting them see what other organizations are starting to do in this space. I think those are, for me, the two ways in which you begin to build leadership engagement and advocacy. And I think also through storytelling and having stories being told and bringing those stories into the boardroom. I think that's really important.
And I've got to be honest with you, Jeff, and we see this time and time again, and I'd be interested to actually hear anyone that is listening, if this really resonates with them. The challenge that we often have when we talk about programs of this nature is that actually the CEO, the CFO are probably the people, no, that's a massive sweeping statement, are often people who have no interest in this area, can't resonate with this area at all, to then start speaking about it, and the importance of a program of this nature, it's just not clicking. It just doesn't land with them at all. And that's why it's so important what you're talking about, and obviously the work that we do, and I can be very frank about this on many instances, the work that we will do, you're an incredible person for us to go and lead with, to go and have those conversations and to share some of your story as well, because immediately people are like, God, yeah, I get it, and I understand. It becomes a very powerful communication that people suddenly realize, yeah, it could happen to me for all of this stuff. And we are going to talk about the employee responsibility in the moment, but even if it's a CEO signing something off or a CFO signing this off, as humans too, we have to suddenly resonate with it and think, this could happen to me. I get it. This is something that's relevant for everyone, not just X person. And certainly when we do this work, we always think to ourselves, how do we make it as relevant as possible to everyone within the organization? That for me is certainly our guiding light. So look, we'll say that we get we get leadership on board, and we can talk more about this, but it's crucial for leaders to be part of this program of activity, whatever it ends up looking like, and certainly whenever we launch programs, we always ask that the leaders kind of stand shoulder to shoulder with us in any work that we're doing, to say, look, I'm getting behind this, and also for the team to see the leaders are actually getting involved in this kind of behavior, so they're actually going on, for example, if you do session programs with us, going along to sessions, or if you're doing any kind of audit or any new behaviors that are an expectation, the leader is defining those behaviors themselves, rather than just saying that everyone else should be doing them. It makes a radical change. It really does. And people can see the people that they look up to are doing exactly the same. I don't know about you, Jeff, but personally, in order to start any kind of change program, that one of the most important things, is to understand the kind of where you are now and how you're then going to measure this work. I thought I had a really interesting conversation with a client the other day, and they're like, "Yeah, we want to do more and more to support the mental health of our people." And I suppose, my question that I went back to them with was, why? And what I mean by that, as in, we obviously all know that it's a good thing, but what change do you want to affect? Where are you now? Where do you want to get to? Where is the gap? So we can start understanding how we're going to judge the success of this. Is that something you have conversations with a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's part of that, it's part of that organization accountability piece.
Yeah.
So if we come back to saying, okay, so what are the aspects of organization accountability? I think there's sort of, for me, there are 3-4 key areas that an organization has to invest in to demonstrate that accountability. So for me, the first area is, I think organizations have got to invest in resources to break the stigma of mental ill health. Because if we are going to be able to have more open and honest conversations around health in its holistic sense, we have to have an organization where people feel psychologically safe to talk about their emotional and mental health. So that would be the first big area of investment that an organization would make. I think the second area of investment is, I often say, we treasure what we measure. We treasure what we measure. Yeah. And so I do think it's important that we do some kind of audit. We do some kind of well-being survey within the organization. We also survey that we run some focus groups around the ways of working in the organization. Because I sometimes say, if the flower doesn't bloom, in most instances, there's nothing wrong with the flower. It's the environment it lives in. And so we have to attend as an organization to look at ourselves, our ways of working, and to see what are in some of our procedures, our policies, and ways of working that are causing stress for people. So we've done a survey around the well-being of our people to get a measure, to get some kind of measure and some data. We've broken the stigma of mental ill health. We've audited and run some focus groups and understood what ways of working needs to change. Yeah. And then I think there are 2 other elements. I think the other element is, we have invested resources. We've made resources available to people to enhance the different aspects of well-being. So, and in the past, we've done it quite well on the physical side, haven't we, Kate? We've had ride to work scheme, we've had gym membership, we've had gyms in buildings. So what are the resources we could be offering our people to maintain their emotional health and their mental health? And there are all sorts of resources out there that are now available where people can, and are we teaching them? Are we running programs like you offer so people have got the skills and the knowledge on how to maintain their emotional health, their mental health? And have we as an organization created a sense of purpose? So that's the fourth area, is investing resources, whether it's training, knowledge, upskilling, blah, 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 to enhance the well-being of our people. And then finally, I think the fifth element is your point around leadership behavior, and making sure that we have a behavior in our leadership model, in our competency model. When it comes to leaders in this organization, yes, we expect leaders to behave, with integrity, with honesty. We expect leaders to be visionary. We expect leaders to be good team members, blah, blah, blah. We've always had these competencies and the behaviors we expect of leaders. I think we should be building in a behavior which relates to health, well-being. And the reason I say that is because if you don't care for your own health as a leader, you won't care for anybody else's health. You won't.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So if we could build into the behavior, once it's a behavior expected of leaders, then that starts to run through all your leadership development programs, because you're going to build in, how do leaders maintain their health and their well-being in this organization? it goes into your recruitment and who you select, and you're selecting people who truly, are looking after their own health and well-being and see it as a priority. And then you begin to see some shifts in the culture of the organization. So those for me are the 5 areas of organization accountability. And by the way, that's going to take time to do. It might take 2 or 3 years, like any other strategic priority often takes time to execute. But it's those 5 areas that if a company is invested in those 5 areas, then I truly believe that they have now taken the accountability, organizational accountability, responsibility to enhance the health of their people.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think, and I think that, just to pick up on some of those points, I just wanted to say that, with regards to the focus group, let's go through them kind of one by one. The focus groups, the audit, in essence, with all of this stuff, right? If we boil it back to what creates better relationships, right? If we're looking after the health of our people, ultimately, one of the biggest things that we're trying to do is develop connection and develop the relationships that we have with the teams. And at the heart of that is communication, more communication of understanding how you are, people feeling more connected. If I understand how you're feeling, then I can do something about it, right? So in order to do that, we need more opportunities for communication. And actually, most usefully, more opportunities for communication when we're talking about something external to ourselves, because in doing that, then you can very quickly get to the internal by talking about the external. Let's talk about the processes and the policies that are happening within the company, because by talking about that, I can say how I feel about them, and very quickly I can get to a place of not only getting to a place of understanding how I can evolve those processes, but maybe some of the stuff that's coming up for me within the workplace. So that is so those that, and we find this when we do audits, and obviously our audits are all very much led by coaches who are brilliant at kind of pulling out really, really quite intimate stuff, but also getting people, most importantly, into that growth mindset, and that's why this work is so bloody valuable, because actually you get people going from the place of everything is going wrong, everything isn't right, this company isn't working for me, feeling negatively, into a growth mindset. We want the first part of someone feeling more healthy and feeling more positive is about that growth mindset, right? And that for me is a huge part of it. My emotional well-being, taking me from a place of negativity and looking backwards into a place of being very, very forward. And actually, those sessions, as part of an overall process of you are being asked questions about the business and your opinion on how we can make it better, is a huge part of that journey of change, right? And getting people feeling like they're much more part of the company, as well as then sharing about actually the change that they suggest that should be making. I think you beautifully put it about the resources. And listen, I am a huge believer of any programs of the kind of nature that we share, or indeed anyone else, it can't feel like it's being pushed in there, right? It's got to feel like it's something that's very much part of your company. But in many instances, if something isn't a craft skill within the business, bringing in an external resource who will not only help maybe deal with more intimate issues within the team, because maybe someone would very naturally not feel like they wanted to share something with someone internally, but will also expedite the process of learning and upskilling with people within the team. So sharing, when we're talking about you've said this beautifully. We are in a bloody situation right now that no one's used to. Things might have been challenging pre-COVID. We might have been stressed and overworked, all those things, but we were really used to what was going on. We are working in a world right now where no one has the right tools or frameworks necessary to be able to deal with it. Even someone who's a blooming trained coach, such as myself, there's new challenges every day, and maybe I've got things in place that I know how I can approach it, but I don't necessarily always have the right tools, and so why would anyone else? So it's about sharing new tools and frameworks to look at things with a different state of mind, and that's where those resources can absolutely come in. And actually, finally, as you said, the whole thing around leadership developing those behaviors as well, and making sure that they make it a priority. So often, and I'm sure, and this is a whole other area, and I don't want to go into it too much, but I think that what's happened with people being in lockdown and what's happened throughout this pandemic, it has really shown that we need to improve the genuine leadership skills of some of our leaders. to be much more conscious, to understand the impact that they have on others and the impact that others have on them. And more importantly, understanding how by being more human and treating their team in a much more human way will genuinely get the best of them. So how do we make that much more part of their agenda and part of their responsibility as well?
Yeah.
You've seen that so much.
There's an interesting piece of research done by Gallup recently. And what they went out to do is they researched what are followers looking for leaders in this time of crisis.
Right, interesting.
And there are 4 things that they're looking for.
Yeah.
The first thing they're looking for is that leaders will instill trust.
Yeah.
So they want to trust in this time of crisis. And by the way, this should go beyond the pandemic. But they want leaders they can trust. The second thing that they're looking for from their leaders is that their leaders, and maybe this is very much about the pandemic, is about hope. They want their leaders to instill some hope. So there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. The third thing they want their leaders to do is they want their leaders to instill stability. Just bring some stability to these very uncertain times that you were talking about. And you know what the fourth thing is? And this talks exactly to what you were saying, Kate. The fourth thing that they're asking of their leaders is please show compassion.
Absolutely.
Compassion. Now, none of the leaders that I've come across and the various business schools that I've spoken in or I've been to, I mean, when it comes to leadership development programs, we're not developing leaders to show compassion. It doesn't seem to be part of the leadership development curriculum, creating more compassionate leaders that instill trust, hope, stability, compassion. And so that's why I think there's such an opportunity going forward, that we have these leaders that are just showing more compassion. And I'm sure that during the pandemic, those organizations where their leaders have done those 4 things, I bet you they've seen a huge uplift in performance, in loyalty, in engagement, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. Listen, and actually, I wouldn't disagree with you, and certainly, I mean, that's just such an easy win, isn't it? And interesting, we've got one question here from Mawan saying, hi, quick question. How do you build psychological safety in a team? And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. Those 4 areas as a leader, if you can put those things into your team, where your team trusts you, where they can see hope, where they feel stability, and are shown compassion. I mean, they're crucial for safety, right? Those really are. And I think that...
Yeah, I think... But you know what I think the other thing is? If you want to really build psychological safety in a team, I think you've got to have a leader of that team and those team members who are prepared to be vulnerable.
I could not agree more.
Hey? I think they've got to display vulnerability. They've got to talk about some of their vulnerabilities. They've got to be open as the leader to share some of those vulnerabilities. And I think if leaders do more of that and are just a little bit more vulnerable, and I often say being vulnerable with skill, okay? There's times when you don't want to be vulnerable, but just being a bit vulnerable. I think as leaders are more vulnerable, so you create a higher degree of psychological safety.
And more to the point, that's when you create your moments of connection, right? That is when you genuinely connect with people. And that, for me, if in terms of creating that safety within the team, it's knowing that you connect with someone, knowing that you have that link between the two of you, and you can share when something is coming up for you, as well as you being there for someone else, and the team that just, obviously on a smaller scale, but within Push, we have that so much, and we can all share that with each other. And boy, do we come together as well in terms, I know that we have that unity for that, sharing with each other, not only how we're feeling, but also being able to push the business forward as well. It's absolutely crucial. It really is. And I think,
Kate,
go on, no,
sorry, Kate. I'm just staying with it's. I don't know how to pronounce Tamin's. It's Morian's name, but she's But I've also got a document on how to build psychological safety at an organizational level. So I'll send that to you, and then you can make it available to her. And there's sort of nine things that an organization can do, and I'm sure you can apply it to a team to build psychological safety.
Amazing. And
you know,
I would say at the heart of that is absolutely communication, you know, as much as you can be having, you know, and a time, you know, sharing with people, you know, at times when there is real uncertainty, it's those moments of connection, those moments of communication, so people know that it's two-way and they can come through and ask questions as well. We've got time for one more. Dominic says, do you have advice for people working in an organization that doesn't invest in this stuff? Well, I mean, from my point of view, I think that, you know, certainly the takeouts that we'll be sharing after this, there are many in there that you guys can be doing anyway, you know, without investing in this stuff, you know, and in particular, we talk about leadership behaviors, as well as, for example, how can we create more safe environments? Is there anything more specific than you'd add from that, Jeff?
Yeah, Dominic, I mean, I would go back to a little bit of what I was saying as well, is, I mean, you want to get the leaders on board around this stuff. And as I said earlier, I think there's a role for an external catalyst to bring the external catalyst in. There could also be a role for, you know, having somebody externally help you think through the business case and being able to take that business case to your leadership organization. I think there's also looking at your competitors and seeing what your competitors are doing in this area of health and well-being, and putting that in front of the leadership, because you know, there's always this there's this professional competition that goes on, that we want to be better than so and so, and if they're doing it, we better do it. So look, I think there's, you know, and then there's the power of storytelling, and how do you get stories into that executive team, which is kind of showing that if we're not investing in the health of our people, you know, look what will happen, and those stories really resonating. So Dominic, I hope that helps to answer a bit of your. But I think sometimes just that external catalyst and somebody to come in and say stuff and bring the external in to that leadership team, it can be a huge catalyst to getting stuff done.
And also, so we're coming towards the end now, and we've talked a lot there about the employer responsibility. I just wanted to end by saying, and by the way, this is all certainly shared within the takeout sheet that we're going to be sending out afterwards as well. But as much as there being an employer responsibility, there is certainly a responsibility on the employees as well. And I suppose I just wanted to end by saying this, you know, for any of us, and this really does kind of go to us, either individuals listening to this who are an employee or individuals listening to this as an employer, you know, the prioritizing self-care doesn't just happen, you know. And if I think back to certainly my time when I was signed off, my self-care was the lowest on the agenda, you know, everything else came before that. And no wonder then I didn't have the resources available to be able to deal with whatever was coming my way. So in the first instance, helping the team as well as ourselves understand the importance of prioritizing ourselves is crucial to any of this work happening, any of this work actually taking any kind of effect, you know. And incentives, be they personal, or be they individual, or be they obviously something that's coming from the organization, could well be the thing that actually tips that over. And ultimately putting that within either within our KPIs, or indeed, you know, reviews and promotions as well, I believe will be one of the most important factors for actually making this stuff genuinely work. Do you agree, Jeff?
Absolutely. You know, and I'm quite utopian and idealistic about all this, but I can't wait for the day when every organization who has some kind of development process for their people, where they have conversations about the development of their people, one-on-one conversations, that part of that conversation is a well-being plan, is a future fit plan, not just a skills development plan, not just a coach for your behaviors, but you've also got a plan, you've got some ideas, you've got some thoughts, the company has invested these resources, you're going to go off, you're going to use those resources to enhance your emotional health, your mental health, and twice a year, you're going to have a conversation about your well-being and the progress that you're making. Why? Because it drives your energy. Why? because energy is the most important driver of individual, team, and organization performance. There can't be anything more important.
Well, and on that note, I mean, there is quite simply nothing more to add. So I would love to close. We are literally on the dot of 13:30, and I would the irony would be if we were to add more stress to people's day by running over. So let's end on that note. Jeff, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your experience, and your thinking. If anyone wants to get in contact, we totally appreciate that every organisation is different. If anyone wants to get in contact with either myself or with Jeff, we will be please do. We are going to share the handout straight after this with some brilliant takeaways in it, some brilliant learnings, and we really look forward to talking to you further and hopefully helping you make health a strategic priority in your organisation in 2021. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great afternoon.